we teach people how to treat us. That's huge. I do that all day long in individual sessions and in couple sessions. I talk about this point, and I always wrap it kind of into the cliche of you can't learn to love anyone else until you first learn to love yourself. I think that it's important and it's true. I think that we're often seeking something in relationships. We're often seeking love, respect, what being validated. And I think that those things first have to start within self. I think that respect to look to someone to give you respect or to respect you, you have to first respect yourself, or setting healthy boundaries. That's a big part of what I do all day long in sessions is boundaries. You would be surprised how difficult it is to get people to develop healthy boundaries, especially with family members or intimate partners and parents. Oh, that's the number one big one, right? Because if you are an adult, and if you come from the Black or brown community, you guys are going to know exactly what I'm talking about, how hard that is to set boundaries or tell your parents that they can't do certain things. But we have to understand that we're seeking to be healthy, right? This is about being healthy. This is not about being traditional. This is not about, I think that it's important to have boundaries with everyone, with your kids, with your parents, with everyone. And the closer the relationship, the harder it's probably going to be to establish those boundaries, because I teach boundaries in three phases. And that's the first one is development, right? And when you're developing a boundary, you have to have a consequence attached to it. If you don't have a consequence, I tell all my clients it's of no consequence. You might as well forget it. You're just blowing hot air, right? Don't walk on my grass. I don't want to walk on my grass. Stop walking my grass. I don't want to walk on my grass. But if there's no consequence, right, there's no way to potentially modify the other person's behavior, right? So if there's no consequence, consequences have to be effective, right? So we definitely need to develop healthy boundaries with consequences, and those consequences have to be something you're willing to execute. You can't say, if you walk on my grass, I'm going to send you to the moon. We know you ain't got no rocket ships in your backyard, that you're just blowing hot air, right? So it has to be something that you're able and willing to execute. And it has to be something that causes the person that it's meant for some level of, I'll use the word distress, right? Because we don't often pay attention until we're distressed, right? So we want to kind of shake things up a little bit, right? So that's what the consequence is about. The second stage is the communication. I tell everyone I work with, whether it's an individual or couples, it is totally unfair to set a boundary, right, and not communicate it. I said, you can equate that to putting up a fence, an electric fence around your property, or having a huge dog. Every government or state requires that we put some type of warning, right? You have to put, hey, warning, electric fence, there are 300 joules or volts going through this fence. Touch at your own risk, right? If it's a big dog, beware of big dog, right? We have to put that up. It's the same way with boundaries. A lot of times we communicate boundaries and we think, oh, we're doing a good job. I told him I didn't like it. I told him I didn't like it. No, that's just you telling them you don't like it. That's not you setting a boundary. Telling someone you don't like something, and that's the thing, right? We think that's the MRS, I think, popping in. Sometimes maybe men can do that too, where they communicate, I don't like it. I don't like it. I want you to stop it. I want you to stop. Right? But that's not setting a healthy boundary, right? A healthy boundary sounds like, I want you to stop that behavior, or I will not tolerate that behavior. If that behavior continues, the consequence will be X, Y, and Z. That's a fully developed boundary. Saying I don't like it, yelling, screaming, threatening, that's not setting a healthy boundary. I just need us to understand that, because they say, I told them 100 times I don't like it. You can tell them 100 more. right? But if there's no consequence, right, there's nothing to modify the behavior. Boundaries also can be set for ourselves or they can be set for other people. I tell people all the time, when people who, especially people who struggle with creating boundaries for close relationships, boundaries aren't just for you, protecting you. Boundaries are also for protecting the other person from you, right? Because if the person keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and this is sometimes maybe, and maybe it's just me, maybe I'm the only person who has exhibited or seen it in my lifetime, where a person you pushing you, and you snap and you spaz out and you cuss the person out, and then then you're sitting around and you're saying, oh, you're feeling bad, and now you got to go through the cycle of shame and regret, right? And then we got to apologize, and then we kind of just do the same thing over and over and over again, right? And the reality is this is what I've learned about teaching boundaries. Boundaries are the quickest way to free ourselves, right? Because when we have people in our lives who constantly push buttons or do things, right? We know that Leroy coming over, and Leroy is one of those people that loves to push my buttons, right? And we're already having anxiety because we know Leroy's coming to the event, right? And the reality is, because we're on guard, right? We're hyper vigilant about how that person is going to behave, right? We're already hyper vigilant about that. So when I say boundaries free us, right, what it does is, when you set a healthy boundary, you develop it and you communicate it, right? You no longer have to wait for Leroy, anticipate what Leroy is going to do, right? Because you already got a plan in place, right? And you already know that you communicated it to Leroy. Now, guess what happens? And this is where the shift happens, right? Where I no longer have to watch Leroy's behavior. Guess what? Now Leroy has to watch Leroy's behavior, right? Because Leroy knows the boundary, right? And he also knows the consequence, because I've communicated the consequence to Leroy, right? So my thing is, now Leroy has to determine whether he's willing to pay the consequence or not, right? Which frees me up. I don't have to worry about it. I've already got this plan in place. If you do this, this is what's happened. I'm willing to execute it. I don't even have to think about it, right? So the anxiety reduces, right? Because I don't have to be hyper vigilant about watching Leroy's behaviors. Leroy need to be watching Leroy's behaviors. And that's how behavioral modification happens.